Welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Sana Maqbool, once again with you at PTV WORLD, bringing you stories from around the world and within Pakistan, and taking a look at the story from all different angles. We, of course, at the debate try to give you different perspectives so that you form your own well-informed opinion. In today's show, we will be talking about two important topics. One, which, of course, has to do with the situation at home regarding the PDM and its failure to launch an anti-government protest. Of course, this comes in the aftermath of the controversial bills that we have discussed previously on the show as well, where we've seen that the opposition had tried to bring forward a unified stance and strategy and also failed miserably. There's, of course, talk about how within the movement there are obviously deadlocks. The party still hasn't come up with a final strategy. It has now pushed it again to a 6 December meeting, after which something will come out, and that, of course, remains to be seen. We'll explore this in further detail, try to understand what exactly it is that the opposition has in mind, whether or not such things need to be taken seriously, and what, if any, are the consequences for the government and the political scenario in Pakistan. Next, we will also be taking a look at the situation between India and China. We also know that these tensions have been continuing for some time now. Border tensions have been increasing. There has been high altitude exercises and tests from both the sides. We have seen that the forces have been gearing up at the borders as well, and military talks have failed in the past as well to resolve these issues. And despite these talks, the situation on the border does not improve. We'll explore this in further detail, try to understand the origin of these issues and how they're progressing, and what sort of a consequence does it hold for the region in general, and of course for Pakistan as well. What other forces are into play in this particular dynamic as well, and we'll be discussing that with our experts as well. As always, we have Mr. Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal in the studios with us. Thank you for joining us once again. And we will also be joined by experts on both topics as well. As soon as they're part of the show, I will welcome them. We have been joined by Barrister Iftikhar Ahmed, who's a former senator and lawyer. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us on the debate. Well, let's start with what the opposition and the PDM has been planning to do in terms of toppling the government, launching an anti-government strategy or a protest movement, all of which is still talk. We haven't seen anything come out of that yet. We've seen that the passing of many of the bills that were deemed controversial or questionable also within PTI have been passed, and the government has emerged victorious on this stance, and the opposition has failed to point out the fact that the government does not have the support that it in fact does. Mr. Iftikhar Ahmed, considering the fact that we have seen in the recent days how the government has proven all the kind of statements that we've been hearing from the opposition side to be wrong, they've managed to pass the bills as well, and the opposition movement has failed to bring forth any strategy in terms of a protest movement or mass resignations from the assemblies that they've been talking about. Do you believe that there is any substance in what they're saying, specifically with regards to what they are announcing to come out after 6th of December's meeting?
Well, actually, see, watching their activities and their origin actually gives us a wider understanding of the opposition in Pakistan. In fact, there are two platforms where the opposition to the present government is emerging. One is the parliament, and the other is on the streets through demonstrations or public rallies. Now, the reason for their failure or reason for their ineffectiveness is the origin from where this PDM emerged. If you look at it carefully, this is a collection of mostly those people who were defeated in the elections. So if the raison d'être, as they say, of some organization coming into existence is based on such flawed reasons, having total absence of ideology, they're bound to fail. History of Pakistan, where such political movements and such collection of opposition leaders under various names and shades at various times had been basically to see the ouster of the present government. Now, at this point in time, what PDM is saying is about the dearness and the prices of commodities. That has never been an issue which basically is a pattern. It keeps on happening throughout our history and government's reign, where other factors, which is beyond the government, and importantly, now that issue is being understood clearly by the people at large, that there are other factors. So I would say that the activity of the opposition in the parliament is totally ineffective. It is anti-democratic in my view. I mean, what use is that democracy where people just shout and demean the atmosphere of the parliament? And then when it comes to vote, which is the essence of their being in the parliament, they just walk out. Whatever is the reason, they must satisfy their constituents that they are doing their duty by playing their role. But that's not a role. I mean, this can happen on the streets also. You can shout, you can tear papers, throw it on the
Right.
windows of anybody. So, therefore, in my view, this is a very weak conglomeration of political parties and heads, 11 political parties. Hardly anyone minus major two political parties is worth the name. So these kind of arrangements can never succeed. And
Right.
on the
So,
other hand, yeah, please go ahead.
yes, continue.
No, you go ahead.
Right. So once we see the fact that they're somewhere in between going for a dialogue or reconciliation and an all-out confrontational politics, and this is something that Maulana Fazl Rahman was also asked about, how this is a duplicity of the strategy of PDM moving forward, and his response was, of course, that it's going to be clear after the 6th of December, even if it's clear or not, considering the fact that this is something that's been going on for a while, they're somewhere in between. Is this the way that they plan to interact, or is this the normal way that they would want to put forward their opposition stance? To be somewhere in between. This is just a way of talking of how they want to move forward with something, but really this is where they want to be staying.
As I explained, that this is the get together of all those people and smaller political parties that lost in the previous elections. Now, in order for them to be surviving, they got to do some kind of activity, and they got to shout and be on the streets. Without that, beyond that, I actually do not see any purpose, or they do not have something substantive to lean on or to stand on, where the people are much more aware now. They cannot be led by empty, shallow, hollow slogans. Now that time has gone. Now everybody is more concerned about the real, tangible things happening to them, either this government or previous government or another government. So I would say that they are also uh, placing themselves in the same pattern as we've seen in the past, and that is that any political government that had been elected in the past, halfway through, there emerges a surge and a feeling, oh my God, we've had enough of that. Now, end to this. Now, that has been happening in the past. Like, for instance, when we had Article 58(2)(b), where the president had the power to wake up in the morning one day and just uh, uh, throw out the assembly and cancel the government and bring his own rule. Now, that kind of thing is gone. It's not happening. Whatever Maulana Fazl Rahman says or anybody else alongside for asking for the resignation of Imran Khan is history. It's a joke. It's not a serious opposition. And uh, I think the reason PPP and ANP left them was because of their uh, past serious experiences of political activity. Now, what Maulana Fazl Rahman is experiencing is that for the first time ever in his life, he's lost elections. There is no more razzmatazz of the power and the office. So now if that is the reason for those who lost elections to form an opposition called whatever it called PDM or anything else, and ask for the resignation of the prime minister, that's a joke. Equally, please keep in mind that the past opposition movements, like movement against Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and the emergence of General Ziaul Haq taking over power, they were all motivated by other external factors as well.
Right.
If you look
So,
at PDM, there's hardly anything.
right. So, considering if these tactics are outdated, Farrukh, do you think that if these demands or these stances by the opposition saying that they want to resign or they want the government, they want to topple the government, these are things that are a joke and don't sell anymore. Do you agree that the people or the base that they're trying to attract from the nation, they will not be able to get through this way, and that they would have to be able to go the parliamentary route, or this is something that is still appealing to the people?
Right. First of all, let me, pass my greetings to Barrister Saab. Barrister Saab is such an institution. We have been hearing him for quite some time. So I thought that while he was talking, I was thinking, what am I going to add to this? But let me tell you regarding the opposition. I think that Pakistani opposition right now is like Pinocchio. You know the story of Pinocchio, a wooden boy who wanted to be a real boy and kept on searching for a blue fairy. Right? At this moment, this opposition doesn't have internal cohesion or coordination, and they keep on reinventing the past grievances. And that's how what happens is that every time they think that there is a blue fairy out there, they actually start moving. The moment that fairy disappears, or they think that it disappears, especially I'm talking about establishment or other institution, they all of a sudden collapse or sit down. Regarding why PDM has not been able to actually be successful, on one side, of course, in democracy and in governance, you always have weak wickets and strong wickets and innings or balls which are strong or weak. But there is one reason why opposition has not been able to garner the kind of traction that is needed, and that is, to be honest, that they don't have internal cohesion. PMLN has two tracks. On one is Shehbaz Sharif, on the other, as we saw today, is Maryam Nawaz. Then they kept on fighting with People's Party when PDM was created, that they are going to resign. People's Party parted its ways ages ago, and so far, no resignations, right? So if you cannot walk the talk, then who is going to listen to what you are saying, and why would they listen to it? There was a time when they created ARD, the two major opposition parties, and they said that they are no longer going to, discontinue or try to actually derail democracy. And for past 3 years, what they have been trying to do is derail democracy again.
Right.
If you haven't learned any lessons from your past conduct, how do you think people are going to actually trust you?
So is there a way forward for them to be able to go towards a different route now? Faisal, do you really think that there is a change now? What the barrister was also earlier saying, that perhaps the things of the past that have worked for the opposition are not working anymore, and they are actually going to other routes, because they keep talking about certain things, but none of them that is actually happening.
Sana, as I see it, it's a new Pakistan. Nothing from the past, the opposition stance and the way things used to be in the past, it can't work anymore now. Why? Because we have a very good example of previous opposition, who was in the opposition previously. We had Prime Minister Imran Khan's PTI in the opposition, and it was a very weak opposition. It was considered as a weak opposition in terms of numbers. 30 plus numbers they had in the National Assembly, and they had a government based in KPK. That's what they had at that time. But if you look at the political activeness and their narratives, they were being sold everywhere. I mean, their narratives were being bought everywhere. And if you look at the previous government, the government they were challenging against, it was a very powerful government, but their narratives were very weak, and their footing was very weak. But if we look at the current government, though the government hasn't got the heavy majority or two-third majority or anything like that. But when it comes to the narratives, if there are cases against PDM leaders, if there are cases against the opposition leaders, then them cases, though they are always shouting about it that these are the politically motivated cases, but it is very easy for the government to tell the people that this is not the case of political motivation when it comes to the cases. There are genuine cases and corruption did take place, and now obviously they are facing the law, the rule of law. And if we look at the institutions, they are working with their own will. If we look at the previous government, we remember the NAB chairman, when he was summoned to the Supreme Court, when Supreme Court asked him that why didn't you reinitiate the case, and he mentioned that I was not having the mandate to do it. So it means that they always look towards the government of that time. But now it is not the case. I mean, institutions are working with their own will. So institutions are working, and Parliament should work as well. And Parliament can only work through, obviously, if all of the members, including opposition, they work well. The work which they are assigned, they should do it there.
Right, because of course the opposition is also a very important and significant part of a democratic setup. Mr. Iftikhar, considering what we've seen in the history of Pakistan, whenever we look at the opposition and its role, as far as I see it, it's always been of a party or a movement that is there to topple the current government or to point loopholes in the current government to the extent that everything is wrong, and then they should not be sitting at that seat, and that is the only way forward to remove the current government and to come up with a different solution. How do you see the role of opposition? What is the role of a responsible opposition in a democratic setup? What is the ideal situation we're looking for from the opposition here?
Do not understand democracy. To be honest, I've been in the parliament myself, and I have seen total nincompoops. Those who were sleeping throughout the session with their legs on the desk, and it presented such a pathetic state of affairs. Now, if we do not have deep-rooted and strengthened democratic moorings, we cannot expect behavior or methods and approaches of opposition in a proper, comparable democratic setup. I mean, we do not have any precedence of our elected people reverting back to their constituents or being answerable to their constituents for the whole term for which they're elected. I mean, what kind of a democracy is it that you get votes from a constituency and you only go there after 5 years seeking another term? And then the pathetic state of affairs of our Biradari system, our kinship, and our landlords, holding great influences in various areas due to other reasons, they have entered politics. And that element has totally killed the spirit of democracy. And all this is the product of unnatural democracy that we have. I mean, I just explained to you earlier that what kind of opposition is this, and anywhere, where else this happens, other than sporadic instances in the world, where on every issue you tear the papers and try to harass the speaker or the chairman and shout and throw things and sometimes go and grab the other person's neck. Now, for this you don't have to be in the parliament. Such a huge building, such expense, and such travel and everything, all the paraphernalia that comes with it, is not required. It can happen in an open park where people can do that. Now, that is the saddest part. So if we look inwards, are we ready for this kind of democracy? Are we choosing people on the basis of parliamentary democracy that is elsewhere practiced in the world and actually be able to conduct ourselves like that? Sadly, no, it doesn't happen. So all we are seeing is a tamasha, a halla gulla, speeches. And I mean, for instance, I heard some participant of a PDM movement, and he was simply saying that he was asked to come because there is a Sirat al-Nabi conference or something, Risalat. I mean, totally baseless reasons, and they know that. They know they cannot call people to follow them on a genuine ground. There are no genuine ground for them. The only grievance and only problem is lost elections, lost power, lost prestige. They can't go back to there. So therefore, one has to look very deeply into our system of democracy. It's not working.
Absolutely.
In my view, it's not working.
Right. Thank you very much for joining us, Senator Iftikhar Ahmed, for being with us and sharing your views. Before we move on to the next topic, Farrukh, my last question would be to you, considering the importance and of the current setup of moving forward with democracy in the country. It's fairly new for Pakistan as we see it. But don't you think that when we talk about strengthening institutions, perhaps we also have a role to play in strengthening the opposition in terms of a general abstract ideal that we want to be able to see in the country? Is there something that you think that the government or the current institutions can also play a part in terms of changing the nature of the opposition?
Right. Well, first of all, it is basically up to the opposition to change its nature. It is not up to the government, because then you'll say that the government is messing up with the, messing with the
Sure, but can we do
opposition.
something?
Yeah, but let me tell you, first of all, you have to understand what the role of an opposition is in the parliament. It is essentially of oversight and of accountability, right? Any bill that is passed, the opposition should be able to study it and actually have constructive criticism about. Did that happen that day when you were talking about so many bills being passed? Again, another huge problem with our opposition is that the opposition doesn't have any kind of institutions. For example, UK is the mother of our democracy, Westminster democracy. There they have shadow governments. Do we ever have shadow governments? Why not? Because opposition, it thinks that if we are going to make Chaudhry Nisar or Hasan Iqbal, the shadow interior minister, then the other party is going to walk out and break away from the party. That exactly happened before the election. That's why Chaudhry Nisar is not in the party, right? Then again, when you talk about homework, zero homework. And then the last thing, when you don't do your homework, what do? It is usually bluster, invective, hyperbole. For example, this idea that it was humongous, disservice to the democratic norms that the parliament passed so many bills in such a short period of time, right? You listen to that kind of statement. Let me compare it with another thing that happened and everybody celebrated in this country, and that was 18th Amendment. You had a parliamentary committee. I'm not saying that there wasn't any, but after that committee had agreed on various things, an average backbencher was not allowed to comment on any part of that 18th Amendment. And it was by far much more far-reaching than the current bills, right? And this has been happening in Pakistan for ages. Earlier, Faisal was talking about one thing, that was NAB. My question to the opposition is, why do we have a NAB right now? You had promised in 2007 that you are going to do away with NAB because you signed Charter of Democracy. After that, both the parties had 5 years of government. They never could do anything about it. Today you can criticize it. Yesterday you kept on using these institutions against your own enemy. Do you know who created NAB? Basically, it was Accountability Bureau that was created by Mian Nawaz Sharif. Similar kind of bodies have continued to be there, and we see the double standards of the opposition today. If it wants to improve its
It has to do it
working,
itself.
it will have to first start doing its homework.
Absolutely. Faisal, any last words before we move on to the next topic?
Sana, it is all about the moral ground, and I think the current PDM and the opposition leaders, they don't have any moral ground. I mean, we do expect that they perform well in the parliament and they work for the people, because this is what they are there for. But we can't expect them doing it because they don't have the moral ground, the right moral ground, because all they do is they are active just because of one reason, that they want to save their corruption, and they want to fight the government just because of one reason, and that is that they want to prove that the cases which are against them, which are proven in the courts, they just want to get rid of them by hook or by crook. But this is not the time that somebody would allow them to use the crooks.
Right, so it seems that the kind of opposition that we are hoping for is a fantasy in the near future, just like the unified stance that the opposition keeps talking about. We'll move on to the next topic, which of course relates to India-China tensions. We've seen the evolving situation in recent times, in the past as well. It's been a while that border tensions have been rising and that talks on this issue have kept on failing as well. We will be joined by an expert on this topic as well. But before we move on to that, Faisal, first of all, let's take a look at the overall scenario of how the situation has evolved in recent times. We understand the border tension has been there for a while now. We've seen that both sides have stepped up their military presence at the border, and the military talks have also failed in the recent times. Moving forward, do you think that this can be a standoff that just remains a standoff and there is no real progress, and that the talks that may happen between the two sides will amount to nothing, just as we see the situation in Kashmir?
Sana, I just want to take you back to 2020. I think a week before when Galwan incident took place, I was, in a conversation with General G.D. Bakshi, and I said to General G.D. Bakshi that you are getting a build-up on Eastern Ladakh, and this is a serious build-up by the Chinese. And you know what he said at that time? He said, oh, conventionally, and if we look at the historic perspectives, China has always had a focus on its eastern side, and it never came towards us. So we are not bothered about it because we are enjoying the contract they had or agreement they had with the Chinese for 45 years. Back in 1975, they had an agreement with the Chinese that they would never use the weapons in there and all. But when I said to him that this build-up is a very serious build-up, he didn't listen to me. And after 5 days of that day, Galwan happened. And of course, that build-up is increased since then, and there is no decrease in it. And Chinese, they have not only built up the troops, they have actually created along Arunachal Pradesh, they have created 3 air bases, completed ones, and the 4th one they are about to complete it. I'm not saying it. Lieutenant General Manoj Pandey, who happens to be commandant of the Eastern Command of Indian Army, he said it. And if we look at their defense minister, he himself said it, that 38,000 square kilometer, we have talked about it in previous programs as well, 38,000 square kilometer of Eastern Ladakh and 90,000 square kilometer of Arunachal Pradesh, it is in the hands of Chinese, and Chinese are claiming it that this belongs to them. And India is doing what? India is trying to match with the build-up, but if we look at their build-up, yes, they have been building it up, but if we look at their build-up of last year, of course, that build-up in sub-zero temperatures of Eastern Ladakh and that region, it requires a hell lot of money, and India is spending that. But last year, when they asked for US and UK for the equipment, the special equipment for their soldiers, then they had to contact 3 different companies to get that because it was needed urgently, and of course they don't have the domestic production. But when it comes to China, China has their own domestic productions. Domestic defense production of China is actually an edge for China. But India is lacking behind it. So all India can do is spend it billions of dollars and build it up. That's it.
Right, but Faisal, at least we can say that India may perhaps be taking this threat more seriously now than the conversation you had in the past. We also welcome Mr. Adil Farrukh Raj, who's a geopolitical analyst in the show. He's joined us on Skype. Thank you very much for being with us on the debate. Sir, can you hear me?
Sure.
Considering, of course, the discussion regarding India-China relations and what we've been talking about with India stepping up its military presence and, of course, engaging with Russia and the US in terms of increasing its military capability as well, the standoff still continues at the border with China. And the fact remains that, of course, this issue has not been able to be to progress any further with any of the talks that have been going on both the sides. Keeping that in mind, do you think that India is interacting with China in a way that is at par with the kind of threat that it poses to the country?
You see the
India able
situation,
to reconcile with the fact that it's China they're dealing with?
Yeah, you see the situation. Raja Faisal very rightly briefed you about the latest situation, starting from 2020, the Galwan incident. But the situation has been simmering up for decades now. And it's starting in 1962. We know that there was a all India, there was all-out war between India and China. And since then, China never acknowledged the border, international border, as claimed by India. And China continued the salami slicing. Very expertly, they continued the salami slicing of the Indian border, and Indians could do nothing but to digest it. Off late, you see what happened in 2019 and 20 with the rise of BJP and with the rise of the Hindutva Sarkar, Hindutva establishment in India. They started coming out openly. Their state ministers, federal ministers started coming out openly threatening the existence of Gilgit-Baltistan and the viability of China-Pakistan economic corridor. Galwan was a response to that. What actually happened, what did China actually achieved in Galwan was that they cut off the main supply route of the Indian Army's subsector north, which is the lifeline of Siachen. So if the supply line, the MSR is cut, how can you fight a war? So China effectively curtailed the capability of Indian Army to attack Pakistan and to attack the northern area. Now, there have been 19 different Flagstaff meetings after the Galwan incident. All of them, mind you, failed drastically because the Chinese are not willing to settle. And now, also, let me draw your attention to a very important point, please. You see, there are seven sister states across the chicken neck of India. All of these seven sister states, there is insurgency going on. There are freedom movements going on in all the seven sister states and in the Red Corridor as well. But let's talk specifically about the seven sister states because they border China. Now, it is not the Chinese media, mind you. Chinese media is a very disciplined media. Indian media have been shouting and crying that the top tier leadership of all these insurgencies, all these freedom movements are residing inside China. And we also saw satellite images emerging last year in which on this border of the seven sister states with China, there are settlements emerging out where these freedom fighters are living. Now, you see, China has been carrying out these activities in a pre-planned manner. They haven't been boasting about it, and they won't be boasting about it in future as well. They'll stay very quiet, but they'll continue to support these freedom struggles. There are, mind you, 21 different freedom struggles, small, big, and medium, going on in India right now. I've written an article published in The Nation for that. Now, we only hear about Kashmir. Why? Because there are Muslim involved. We don't hear about the seven sister states. Now, we don't hear about the Red Corridor, who are also fighting on a Maoist agenda. Who was Mao? It was Chinese, of course. So China is already working out a plan which is moving towards, please allow me to say, towards the disintegration, towards the balkanization of India. Because otherwise, the geopolitical game, if you just ignore the diplomatic niceties, it is all heading towards a great game in which China wants to make India its counterweight to the The US wants to make India the counterweight to the rise of China. Well, that's
Right.
not going to happen because it is very much the backdoor of Pakistan and China. Just one last point. You see, India does not have the capability to fight a two front war. Now, any war with China or Pakistan in future is going to be a two-front war in which China and Pakistan are going to cooperate. They're already working towards the interoperability. The defense forces are working towards the interoperability. Gee.
Right. So surely the Indian side does realize all of this. Is it because of course the idea of other powers also aiming to engage with India in terms of containing China in the region? Is that why India is able to interact in the way it is? Farrukh, considering, for example, the United States or the Quad Alliance, is that really putting an effect or an impact enough for India to be able to take on this challenge?
Right. While listening to your other two participants, I was thinking that there is a subtle difference between their focus and mine. Both of them are students of conflict studies. I'm a student of peace studies. So I will try to actually work on the potentialities of peace between all these countries.
All right.
After emerging from a 20-year war that Pakistan has endured against terrorism, I think that we have had enough conflicts in the region, and I would like to see peace, right?
But can we?
Yeah, let me explain why I think
Sure.
that it is not going to happen under the current Indian government. Remember, India, since the days of NAM, non-aligned movement, kept on this very interesting policy of having it both ways, right? Running with hare, hunting with hounds. To Americans, they would say that, okay, we are your allied partner and we are going to work with you. And to China, they would say, come on, we are the Asian brothers, so we are going to continue. And that actually continued for quite some time under Congress. And then comes a gentleman called Narendra Modi, who ends all imagination, goes and signs LIMOA, then BECA, then COMCASA, then ISA, right? When you actually commit to so much alignment, and even then China was okay with it. Then India kept on actually lobbying against, OBOR, that is now BRI, or Belt and Road Initiative. And after that, if you remember in 2017, there was a Doklam confrontation. Do you know what was happening? China was building a border, a road, and it came very close to a country that India says that it is within its purview and no other country should be touching it. That country now has joined China's camp. Can you believe this? So India's present government actually not only attacked itself, it kept on undermining its own ability to operate within all the systems. Look, it has been part of SCO. It has been part of war on terror as well. It should be able to get along with everybody because that way you get richer and richer. What India at this moment does, and honestly, for 20 years, past 20 years, before 2014, what we saw was India actually benefiting from the West and also from China. Now what is happening is India has managed to actually put itself in a position where America is really a distant ally, and China is a country that now sees that India has been actually spewing only venom.
Yeah.
So because of that, they have a very difficult position. What I would like to do is, or like to see is, India and China getting along, Pakistan and India getting along. Otherwise, we won't be able to uplift or bring people out of poverty. That doesn't seem to be happening with Narendra.
Right, that is of course the hope that we all share. But considering the fact that it has become so blatant, as you're pointing out, Mr. Adil, if that is so, moving forward, what sort of options do we even have for reconciliation, considering how talks have failed in the past or how obvious India's stance has been now? Is there a way, considering the position they are in at the moment, for them to have any sort of face saving where they can retrace and be in a position where they interact with China peacefully?
Agree that peace is the logical way forward. You see, peace is the logical way forward. But peace can only be achieved from a position of strength. And as far as India and Pakistan is concerned, the first part of your question, I understand, is regarding the options for Pakistan to reapproach India. I think under the Hindutva establishment's rule, Pakistan does not have any leverage to negotiate with India. So situation is only going to get worse. I'm talking real politics, of course, but the thing is that it is crystal clear that the Hindutva establishment in India is only going to grow, and I don't think they're going anywhere. And they are, let me tell you, call it a prophecy or whatever you want to, but this kind of fanaticism, the fascism, what Hindutva is, it is going to cause India to break from within. Now, of course, India definitely wants to have good time with China. Mr. Pitafi, definitely, he knew what he was talking about. India has been playing both sides. They've always been playing, what both sides? They're playing all sides, less Pakistan. Once their interests collide, once they've got their own favorable government in Pakistan, they've also been making use of us. The thing is that as far as India is concerned, India would definitely want to mend fences with China. But the problem again is Pakistan. In each and every talk, we have seen that India wants a one-on-one relationship with China, in which Pakistan is not considered. I mean, Pakistan is minus of all the discussions. They want China to break ties even with Pakistan. They want to give, let me give you an example. They want to give economic corridor to China if China-Pakistan economic corridor is wrapped up. But the Chinese are iron brothers as they are. They're standing with us, and we've got but no other way to look towards China. Options we have got is to strengthen our interoperability between China and Pakistan and prepare for a two-front war. We are already doing that. We are miles ahead in that sphere. We are working on advanced line in developing the interoperability between our forces. And the first and foremost element is the military hardware. China is our main source of military hardware right now, so we are working on the same equipment. So that brings about, an air of interoperability. And even in the advanced technologies, Chinese are cooperating with us, and we are producing advanced technologies. And mind you, what happened in February 2019 with Abhi Nandan was that he was shot down because there was all the communication of the Indian Air Force was jammed effectively by Pakistan. So nobody could, the messages, frantic cries of the Indian Air Control, Indian Air Force Control for Abhinandan and his team to come back simply didn't reach them, and we were waiting for them to shoot them down. Now, that was a result of the interoperability and the coordination between China and Pakistan. So as far as China and Pakistan is concerned, we don't have the Pakistan definitely do not have any other option but to develop our interoperability with China. At the same time, we have been inviting India, and we are still inviting India to join China-Pakistan economic corridor. Why not to develop this region as an economic power hub instead of fighting for masters sitting 7 seas apart? This is what I think.
Right. Faisal, to conclude, do you see this as an option for India? Can there be any sort of movement in India-China peace talks which are exclusive of India-Pakistan peace talks?
I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful for the peace. As Farrukh was earlier mentioning that he is the flag bearer for the peace, and we are the flag bearers for the conflict. But
students, not flag bearers. Yeah.
I just want to highlight here that peace is the only end to every conflict, and of course we should work for that end to bring sooner rather later. And I think it's India's responsibility. The people of India, I know Hindutva, they are not bigger in number than the sanity that prevails in India, and we can expect from India, the sane India, that they should come forward, and they must know that peace is the only way forward, as Major Adil has just mentioned. And I think this is the only way. Otherwise, if we look at India, of course, they have billions of dollars right now, which they always brag about on their Indian channels. I mean, I've been hearing them. But what they need to do is, rather than sending them billions of dollars to their masters in America, their masters in the West, from where they are getting all of this military equipment. Rather than sending it there, they need to spend it on the poor people of India.
Right, Farrukh, you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say two things. I understand that there must be some skepticism about the possibility of peace between China and India and Pakistan and India. But I tell you that I see some green shoots of hope. For example, recently they had to reverse their agricultural bills, right?
Yeah.
So that means that Narendra Modi's government has actually arrived at a position where they realize that any further escalation will only help other people within his party. For example, Pragya Raj Thakur, and for that matter, Yogi Adityanath. Right? At this moment, peace is the only chance. What Pakistan can do, and I hope China does it also, is actually strengthen your own side. Your Prime Minister, your Army Chief have been talking about peace as well. And in the past, we have seen every government that came into power, they were accused that they are going to concede, but every government tried to actually build peace. So this time, if our leadership takes a decision, all Pakistani stakeholders should be supporting that. Our Army Chief, our Prime Minister, our intelligence agencies, that peace with India is a good thing.
And of course we do, Farrukh. We have been talking about peace for a while now. Specifically, Prime Minister Imran Khan and PTI government has always mentioned in every other conflict as well that of course there is the only solution is dialogue and peace, and we've extended that option to India as well many times before. And we hope that the sanity that Faisal was earlier talking about does actually prevail. We get to see a bit of it, because right now it's just an illusion. Thank you very much for watching the debate. Stay tuned to PTV World.